are taping it, and we have copies of everything. And you know, Nicole and I are hoping to go on the road with this because this is our first run through with this particular topic. So we're here together, a group of people from California who are considering a ballot measure, and people from who have been part of Funding the Next Generation, and people from the Children's Funding Project who have been part of their cohort that is learning about how to put things on the ballot. And so, you know, Dan Whitaker and Olivia Allen are both here from the Children's Funding Project. And so your presenters today are myself. I'm the director of Funding the Next Generation, and Nicole Durst, who is our wonderful, fabulous campaign consultant person who's been with us for, I don't know, it seems forever, and who I got to know in San Francisco when she was the staff person to the Youth Commission here. So she is the unique combination of somebody who is a youth advocate and a star campaign consultant in California and around the country. So we're here to share what we know, have learned, etc. Okay, now I have to sort of figure out how to change the slide. What am I going to do? Just click. Okay, y'all can see this?
Yep.
So this is going to be fun because this is the most fun you can have. And because we're talking about what you can do during an election to promote our cause, to lay the groundwork for the next election or for the measure or for the next measure that you're going to do. But except for Austin here, the pressure's kind of off. This is what you can do ahead of time, so you don't have to worry about being on the ballot. So this is primarily for people who are not on the ballot. So we will entertain ideas from people who, but don't think about what you do when you're doing your own measure. This is what you do to take advantage of the fact that there is an election. And I've been an advocate for many years. And I say to everyone, never let an election go by without getting engaged in some way as an advocate to get your cause paid attention to, because politicians are more hungry than they ever are any other time of year than when they're running. So it is an ideal time to get commitments. The media is actually paying attention to the civic conversation. The public is somewhat engaged in politics. And as I go back through my own history, because this is a historical journey for me to tell you just about everything I've ever done during an election as a children's advocate. And now we have social media, which makes, honestly, if when I started this whole business, 40 years ago, we'd had social media, we could have done all these things and the bang for the buck would have been even greater. So what you're trying to do here is, get support from candidates for your agenda. You want to strengthen your coalition, build relationships, build your political skills, build your political capital, and you can inform the voters about your issues. You can do all of these things when there's an election. And I guess what I want to say is, this is the easiest time to do these things, except when you're on the ballot yourself, because, and I'm going to let Nicole comment on this, but basically you get to piggyback on the work and money that other people are spending on politics. And so you can get a big bang for your buck. So I don't know, Nicole, if you want to say anything about why we're here and what we're trying to do.
Yeah, totally. And forgive me, my voice. I have been in retreats for 8 of the last 10 days, so I've been doing a lot of talking. but I'm really excited to be with you all. I think that elections are such a unique moment because it's a time when, first of all, regular people are paying more attention to what's happening politically and from a policy perspective and what's happening at their communities, as well as the country. So you have the attention of people in a unique way, and you have all of this concentrated energy going into creating wins for the community. And so it's really an exciting time to think about strategically, how can you align? How can you grow your coalition? How can you strengthen your relationships? How can you make sure that, like, coming out of the election, your movement is stronger and your ability to ultimately run your own measure is stronger. So we're going to talk about some specific ways to leverage that moment for your own long-term success.
So we're going to talk about it in terms of 10 ideas. They all overlap. They don't you don't do them in order, but I wanted to make the point that you can do all 10. You could do one of them. You can engage in a whole variety of ways, combinations of things. These are the 10 things. There's probably 10 more we could come up with. Every time I look at this PowerPoint, I come up with another idea to stick in here. And as I said at the bottom, you're piggybacking on everything Nicole's been talking about, this unique time. And it is so much fun. And I think if you approach this as, oh my God, this is such an opportunity and it is so much fun. So I wanted to list all 10 things because the way we're going to organize this is we'll go through each one. I will say, something about it, then Nicole will say something about it. And if anybody who's on this call has done any of these things, oh shit, I knocked my Coke over. Yeah, I hope my computer works. So
I'm gonna take a second, Margaret. I can lead if you...
okay, but I'm gonna get my husband.
No worries.
And help me, but so I know I figured this out.
Okay, cool.
So yeah, I feel like when I learned to use elections, it's like the world opened up for me. And we're going to go through all of these things. And I don't know if Nicole will agree with me, but I feel like we changed a couple of elections as a result of the children's world doing stuff. And if Gavin ever becomes president, we're going to take some serious credit for it here in the children's community in San Francisco. So the first idea is just very simple. And because I advertise this as like, you can do one simple thing and still have it make a difference. So that's my car. I'm for kids and I vote. And that was maybe one of the first things I ever did in an election in San Francisco. I still have, the bumper stickers. And I thought, oh, this is a stupid idea. It's not going to make much difference. And then I overheard people talking about the organization that I ran. And she was trying to explain to other people what we did. And she said, no, those are the people that do the bumper stickers during elections. I thought, oh my God, they don't know a damn thing about anything else we've done, but they know about the bumper stickers. So anyway, I'm sure there's not a lot to say about this. It's pretty straightforward, but I wanted to give you something that you could do really fast and quick, and it wouldn't cost too much.
Awesome. It's a great idea. It's also something, obviously, people don't usually take off a bumper sticker right after an election. So it's likely going to be there for a while and continue to get people thinking about it. So I think it's a great idea.
I loved it. Okay, but moving on to more serious things, although that's very serious. All of these are serious. If you do one thing, do a bumper sticker. Although I did say in that I don't know if other cities have bus shelter signs that you can big posters on bus shelter signs. Did that the same kind of thing once, and we only had the money to do one bus shelter sign, so we did the bus shelter sign in front of City Hall. And I was amazed at how many people
Yeah.
should do
You
it.
can also do like one billboard, you
Yeah.
know, if you do one billboard just for like 2 months, it can potentially be cost effective. And also there's these things now that are digital billboards, so they're a lot cheaper because they change. You guys have probably seen them, you know, on freeways and highways, and those are even cheaper because you can just pay for like an eighth of the time. But it's a good way to remind people of the message.
So, something that we think is really important way to be heard or build your coalition, build your credibility, is to have your people get involved in other campaigns, either as your organization by getting involved in a related subject, whether it's a school bond or a housing or health or the environment, and become an endorser as an organization. I love doing that. You end up on, they pay for the slate cards, they do the mailings with your name on it, having children associated with a campaign. They love it because we're, you know, the public is very moved by a children's organization taking positions. You can do your own slate card. And I really encourage people to work on campaigns, either an issue campaign, and as individuals, you can work on you know, individual campaigns. You can't take a position as a nonprofit on individuals, but I remember the years we would say, okay, we have 5 people running for mayor and everybody has to get involved in one of the campaigns. So whoever wins knows we're here and we have a good relationship with them. Uh, Nicole, you want to say something about that? Nicole runs campaigns. She has a really good sense of what difference this could make. But you can see in the pictures, these are people, children's people, working on campaigns.
Yeah, there's a couple things I would pitch for folks. So if part of the goal here is to make yourself visible and for them to remember that you are there and how powerful you are, you can pitch to a campaign. We want to do a child advocate specific phone bank. Let's say they have a ballot measure on affordable housing, you know, and there's a lot of alignment, obviously a lot of overlap in terms of how it impacts kids. And because the ballot measure, you know, people can take positions on it. So you could organize and say, you know what? You're doing nightly phone banks on September 25th. It's going to be Child Advocates Night. And I'm going to bring 15 child advocates to make phone calls, or I'm going to bring, you know, 15 of them to canvass and knock on doors, but brand it that way. And then the campaign knows not only did some individual people come, but they took a whole night of phone banking or a whole day of canvassing. And, you know, in the scheme of things, it's not, I mean, it certainly takes effort, but it's not that much work to do that once, you know? And then you get those people, as we'll get into later, they're tested and they're ready to do it later, but, you know, every weekend when your measure comes. But it's a really good way to make it bigger by branding it that way to the campaigns.
And
You
as
can,
Nicole said, that you win allies for your measure down the road, and you win endorsers, you know, with either politicians or other interest groups that you have helped. Nicole, you had me put in the idea about wearing T-shirts while you're doing this. I'm for kids and I vote, or I'm for the Kids Coalition, or whatever, and that applies to many of these things. The
yeah.
identifying
I've
things.
seen people do that and then be knocking on doors, you know, for another candidate or another ballot measure, and people ask about their t-shirt, you know, and you're obviously there delivering, you know, the script and the of the campaign you're working on, but then you also have a chance to talk about your coalition. Oftentimes people will ask, so I think that's a great idea.
This is a little more complicated, but it doesn't necessarily have to be. And that is, if you have some asks that you want to use this campaign to highlight, whether it's a complete agenda, whether it's just 3 things, you know, whether you want it to be as simple as supporting additional funding for childcare. I mean, here are some things that can be an ask. I mean, you should do this as part of your coalition, bring your allies together, but this doesn't have to be, you know, 2 years of developing, you know, something that everybody agrees to with every word. It's just a wonderful organizing tool. It can be used as a pledge. You use it throughout the election. It can be general, it can be specific. I worked with a group in Fresno. They did yeah, it was Fresno. They did it was a youth group. They did a survey of young people, what the priorities were, and used that throughout the election as their agenda for you know, for the campaign. The absolute best thing I've seen recently, I found this Philadelphia Kids campaign online, which I didn't know about as I was preparing for this. And this was from last year's mayor election. And I love what they did. They wrote a pledge for candidates of, you know, their agenda, and you can see it. I just think I think it's beautiful. This could be a year in the making. This could be a couple of meetings around a table. This could be general. It could be very specific. I believe no child in Philadelphia should go hungry or live in poverty. Every neighborhood should have a quality school. I love the one that's about, I believe that youth who make mistakes should have restorative options. I think that's beautiful. So I think this whole thing, and I believe youth should have a voice. And then this becomes your agenda and the pledge that you ask various candidates to sign, and we can talk more about that. So you want to speak to that, Nicole?
Yeah, sure. This is awesome. And to Margaret's point, I think it can be general, you know, obviously if you have a mayoral candidate that doesn't sign this pledge, there's something wrong with them and it's going to be difficult. Most of them will sign these general pieces, but then when you get to a place where you're having tough fights, you're having tough conversations later on, you know, you can return to this pledge and really make sure that you're highlighting it. You know, how can you say that you don't, you know, that you don't think any child should go hungry and live in poverty if you're going to cut a program, you know, for food assistance for families, right? So I think the general ones are really powerful. You can also do questionnaires.
We're going to talk about that in a
Oh, we
minute.
do that later. Okay, great. So that can be informed by this, but you know, the other piece of this is that the policy agendas can really kind of help you as an organization and a coalition flush out what's most important to you. So it's progress and has a positive impact on the campaign, but it also can be a really good exercise for coalitions to go through and to kind of regroup and say, you know, what is most important to us and what do we want to highlight under the, you know, guise of these campaigns.
That is great. You know, in some of the illustrations here, like the Vote Kids Can't Vote Weekend, has been done by the American Academy of Pediatrics. I mean, this is not a new concept about how to do this. In fact, it's not new at all. But so I'm trying to share with you some of the graphics that have been done. So and these things are related, but in addition, so then you start, okay, we're going to start organizing meetings with the candidates, and you know, a lot of these things overlap. Now you can have meetings on Zoom and so there are many variations in this. You know, you can have a representative group of your coalition. You can have your most visible people. You can have the people who are connected to that particular candidate. You know, sort of sit down and talk about your agenda, talk about the importance of children's issues, educate them about the needs of kids. You can do this in many ways. One of the fun things that we did, you'll enjoy this, Nicole, is a major mayoral campaign, we had our sort of coalition, and it was young people. It was all the youth development agencies said, well, we want to, have regular visits to the headquarters. And so each agency, I think we did this 10 times, took the responsibility of bringing young people to the headquarters of various of the two mayoral candidates. And they brought with them, the work they were doing, the art projects they were doing, some things that illustrated who they were and what their needs were. And, by the time we got to the end of this, one of the candidates started calling me and said, look, we get the point. Please don't send them here anymore. The other candidate on the last visit threw an ice cream party for them and invited the press. I mean, you can guess who won the race. Because, so it's just a fun example of the different ways you can connect with and meet with people running for office and engage them.
I love that. That's such a great story. The other thing I would say on this is you might want to invite the campaign manager as well, because if what you're trying to do here is influence the agenda of the campaign, in addition to making sure that you're building that relationship, the campaign consultant or the campaign manager will have some sway in terms of what the candidate is highlighting. So that's something to consider in terms of having that meeting. And the other thing I would say is, if you do have polling that shows how important kids are and kids' issues are in your community, bring it to that meeting. Make sure that they hear, like, this is a super popular issue, really important to your constituents. It's absolutely fine to do that.
Yeah, and if they're smart, they'll take a picture of
Yeah.
of you all with them and use it in their literature. So do we have any comments yet on chat of people who want to share something related to this specifically? Because
Yes, Margaret, there was a question, maybe it's better addressed at the end. That's for you to determine. It says from Dan Berman, can you speak to the line that those of us who are government agencies or employees have to walk? Some of these seem like things we can do and some we can't do.
Yeah, mostly you can't do them. You take time off and you do things on weekends, etc. I'm one of the only people. So I ran a child advocacy organization that did all this stuff for 25 years. And then I became head of the Department of Children, Youth, and their Families. So I have a real unique picture of what you can and can't do. And now I'm on a commission, and we have been told in no uncertain terms, because we were appointed by the mayor, we can't do anything. So, so you do have to be really careful about this stuff within government. You do things on your own time. I don't know if anybody else has anything to say about that. I think you can get to a point where candidates might come to you, you run children's services or something, and there are ways you can offer to give information to them, to provide them with data, to get data out during the election time, that doesn't look like you're taking a position on things, but you do have to be careful, really careful about doing things that could in any way be interpreted as taking sides with a candidate. I don't know, Dan, does anybody have a better response?
A couple things to add to that too, Margaret. Any sort of city resources, so in addition to your time, but like, computers that have been provided by the government, your government emails, government cell phones, all of that, like, you cannot use, even if it's on your own time, to do anything related to candidate campaigns, certainly. Yeah, so that was just one thing to add.
Yeah. So a related idea, though, I mean, we used to go meet with editorial boards during an election. so that they would be informed, or your favorite reporter. Or even if they won't talk to you, write a letter to the editor. Like, these are the issues you should be asking about. This is what's happening to kids in our community. And we hope that you will, when you decide who to endorse, when you interview candidates, you will, ask these kinds of questions. Editorial board, they're all busy during campaigns, but if you get them to ask questions and sort of see them as important issue, that can really help. You have any thoughts about that, Nicole?
Yeah, I think that a lot of these editorial boards, they're hearing from, angry constituents on the things that they're upset about. So a lot of stuff on public safety, homelessness and a lot of communities to the streets. And so that's what's getting a lot of ink because that's what they're hearing about. And so being able to talk to them about some of the challenges that, kids and families are facing, as well as some of the really exciting things that are happening in the community, is going to really help them because they're not hearing about that in the same way as some of these other issues on a day-to-day basis. So it's going to help frame things in the context of the election, and it's going to help long term.
Yeah. So we're now getting down to the nitty gritty here. I don't know what every city or county is like, but in most places there are candidate forums. There are public places where candidates go and you get to ask them questions. And so we used to, San Francisco's a crazy political place. So, we have a candidate forum every minute, but you sort of publicize when the various candidates forums are, you assign your people to go, you work together on what questions to ask, and you use this opportunity to get candidates on record, at a candidate forum. If you can get called on, it's kind of iffy, but you try to be everywhere where a candidate is sort of open to answering questions, and you will have a chance to ask them. We're going to talk in a few minutes about candidate questionnaires, but I'm specifically talking about something that is quite simple. Show up at a candidate forum and try to get your question asked, because if candidates start hearing questions about kids, that's going to have a big effect on them. Especially when all they're, as Nicole says, all they're hearing about is, crime and homelessness. So this can be an important way to get your message out.
Yeah, I just want to add, I worked for President Obama in New Hampshire and many other states, but in the primary season in Iowa and New Hampshire, there's actually national organizations who they employ people just to do this. They have people that say, I remember the one campaign and climate change, and there was actually one on global poverty. And so every time there was a candidate forum, and when it's a contested election, right, remember maybe there's 10 people running for president on the Democratic side, they would be there. And that's every day in New Hampshire and Iowa. And they ask the same question every time. And the impact that they made, just by having that one staff person there doing that in terms of the agenda in the Democratic, presidential campaign was massive. So obviously it's not the same. You're not going to have, hire someone to do it, but I just want to illustrate like how much of a difference that can make. And in some of our communities, maybe there's only going to be one candidate forum for a city council race, but oftentimes, there's like 5 to 10. And so if you can have someone, different people or the same person, it's fine, go to 5 or 10 of those and ask the same question. It can really make a big difference, and it can make it in the press, and it can make it online. A lot of people watch these forums now, like on Facebook Live. They're streamed, and so you're influencing not just the candidate but also the electorate. Some are home in the room and some may be outside.
So this next one is one of my favorites because sort of happened upon it sort of accidentally, where we decided, okay, we're going to call all the candidates and ask them for their platform on children and youth. Well, of course, they didn't have a platform on children and youth, which is part of the point, which is the whole point of this. And so either they scramble to make one, or you offer to help, but you got to offer to help everyone. We'll help you develop a platform for children and youth as long as you do it for everyone. And if you can get a candidate to have a platform on children and youth, that is a real win, even if it has 3 planks in it or 1, or so I don't know if you have any thoughts about that.
Yeah, I would just say like, one other thing that I actually did in a, like a city council supervisor race I ran once, was to create the platforms. I brought in groups of advocates with expertise on those issues. And so, one way to sort of frame this too is I will organize a group of, children and youth advocates to come in and talk with you about what we think the platform should be. You could write something for them. You can also use that as an opportunity to have that dialogue. That's a dialogue that is, sharing what you think they should be saying, as well as, getting their perspective on it. So, this is great. And I will say, if you have candidates, especially if you're in a more conservative area, or you have some candidates who really, have not been supportive of funding children and youth services, and individuals on their own want to help a particular candidate with their platform, they can absolutely do that. But if it's the coalition, that includes government people and all of that, then, Margaret, I agree with Margaret that you need to offer to everyone. But certainly as individuals, people can do what they want
On their volunteer time, and people who work for the government can do that. I was always surprised how welcome that was, by people running for office, that they really welcomed the opportunity, and especially if you did bring a group of people to help. And so that can be just a lot of fun, and they remember it. And so, once the election is over, they call on you. So this is this is an elaboration and somewhat different than what we've been talking about. Some people have, and I've done this, sort of bring more of the pieces together and mount a public education campaign with a goal of which is vote with kids in mind. And I have links to 2 campaigns at the bottom of the slide. One is from the Silicon Valley Community Foundation called Choose Children, where they do a poll. Do you care about kids? And then spread that during the campaign particularly to people running for office. And they have fact sheets and stuff they disseminate about the issues related to kids. This Philadelphia Kids campaign, which I'll talk about at the end, is beyond amazing. And what they did to sort of help mount this public education campaign is they develop materials for people to use. So it becomes a place to promote your agenda, to disseminate report cards and fact sheets on kids' needs, to have all whatever swag you want to have on voting for kids, whether it's bumper stickers or pens or shirts or hats. And as I said, the Silicon Valley did does polls around the election time to show how popular kids' issues are. So this, and I don't think as many people are doing it as used to do it, but I think it is important, and that's where you bring in your "I'm for kids and I vote" bumper stickers. Nicole?
Yeah, I would just say it's the kind of thing where, if you have financial resources, that, if you have someone who's saying, I want to give $100,000 to your effort, the first thing you want to do is say, can you give that to the 2026 campaign that we're actually going to run? It'll be more impactful. But if they can't, for whatever reason, they there's limits, or they want to do it now, or, you know, whatever, take advantage of it. This is a really good way to use financial resources. The other thing I would say is if you have a lot of people who want to do something small, right? Like you got a mailing list of, you know, 10,000 people, and 500 of them will take a very easy action if you ask them to. This is a way to, like, you can do things that are basically free. Like you can create like a logo and have everyone change their Facebook profile picture at the same time to be, you know, vote for our future, and then 500 people are doing it in one town. That's really cool. So like, think about it as like, how can you utilize, you know, either financial resources or a lot of people to do something simple for very low cost.
So before we talk about candidate questionnaires and candidate forms, which are like my two favorite, and has anybody have experience doing any of this, or thoughts they would like to share about this before we do the candidate forms and candidate questionnaires? Does anybody want to raise their hand? I can't see raised hands, so.
I can see, yeah, if anyone wants to jump in and share any experiences.
Oh, shit. Oh, excuse me. Okay,
I-
now,
I can share an experience from Sacramento.
thank you.
Yeah, the coalition that was heavily involved in the passage of our ballot measure in November 22 was Sac Kids First. And even though we had won the election, that was really exciting. Immediately following that was the beginning of several elections for our city council and our new mayor. The coalition organized themselves a candidate forum solely focused on young people and
Claudia,
had,
hold that thought, because the last thing we're going to talk is about candidate forums. And I want to spend a lot of time on candidate forums. Can we wait on that?
sure.
Okay, because so the second to last thing that we're going to talk about is candidate questionnaires. And this became a slogan among sort of who's for kids and who's just kidding. I've used this 100 times. It is really a sort of a fun way to sort of do a candidate questionnaire. And it can be very effective, you know, to have, I mean, look how simple those questions are. Or they can be complicated questions. They can be, you know, will you support our measure in 2026? It can be, you know, what's your ideas about funding childcare? Done every variation there is on this, but you can work with the candidate to, if they ask for help in filling out the questionnaire, you can work with their staff, as Nicole says, that they have staff. The candidates themselves may be busy. You know, once one serious candidate agrees to do the questionnaire, and you're going to so once one candidate agrees to do the questionnaire, you can usually get the others if it's a serious candidate. Because if you're going to publish it, they do not want their competitors to be the only people who have sort of come, you know, done something, you know, been public about their support for kids. So, and you can frame the issues, you have to. There are rules around how to frame the issues so that they are neutral. And now we have social media, so you can just get the word out about what they say, you know, so easily. I remember one year, though, convincing a local newspaper that they should insert our candidate questionnaire on kids into the newspaper. We don't have newspapers anymore, but we have some, you know, that they would agree to publish it and insert it, and so that it would have much more impact. But this I think it really is a way to compare the candidates and for the public to compare the candidates. You know, I have a drawer full of these candidate questionnaires, and, you know, they really do have an impact and make a difference. So I don't know if you want to say something about candidate questionnaires, Nicole.
I think you covered it really well. A couple of tips just to make sure that your campaign pays attention to it. Don't wait just from the campaign perspective, right? Don't wait until the last minute to send them out, meaning like, don't send these things out in October or if it's a November election or even in September, because they're really, really busy at that point and everything is pretty baked in terms of what they're saying. So to have the most impact on these, I would encourage you to send them like as close as possible after the filing deadline. So for instance, like San Francisco mayor filing deadline was this week, right? So I would encourage people like, get the candidate questionnaire out by July, in July sometime, so that really you can give them time to fill it out and also more of an opportunity to impact what they're doing and saying in their campaigns.
Yeah. So now we're getting to my favorite idea, and we'll hear from Sacramento as well. This is this is like, to me, the biggest, most impactful thing you can do. It's the most impactful thing I ever did, and it's why I think if Gavin becomes president, we're going to just take a little bit of credit, and as well as credit for some other successes of various candidates. I love candidate forums. I love them, love them, love them. And it's a way to combine a lot of this. And I'll be interested in your opinions, Nicole, about when to start planning them. My experience was getting a date for a candidate forum is an art in itself. So starting early and getting one really viable candidate to agree to come usually helps you get everybody to come, and you get confirmations on a regular basis. So that is just an important aspect of this. You have to, depending on the election, you have to develop criteria for what candidates you're going to hear from. You're going to hear from every fringe candidate. You have to have certain polling numbers, et cetera, et cetera. There are ways different communities deal with that. So, to me, that candidate forum can be a fabulous organizing opportunity. You bring your coalition together and say, let's do this together. And it can be so exciting for people. I guess if you look at the basics, one of my major recommendations is about having a timekeeper, because there's nothing like candidates that love to talk. Having a timekeeper is essentially, but if you have your coalition or even 5 organizations come together to do this and you publicize it, you engage young people and parents, you publicize your agenda, you have a moderator. The best moderators I've seen have been youth, by the way. They're really good at cutting through things. These can be boring or they can be fun, they can be snappy. You have short answers, you have balloons, you have signs, you have pledges for candidates to sign. If everybody's ever been to a sort of Alinsky style organizing meeting, this is a place where everybody gets to sign the pledge about what they're going to do. It is the most exciting thing that I've done as an advocate during an election, and the most impactful. And the first time I did it, for those of you from San Francisco, it was when Art Agnos was running for mayor, and we had the largest candidate forum of the campaign. It was huge. It has such an impact when candidates walk in and the room is filled. Did something similar with folks in Merced, and the room is filled and there are balloons and the media is there. And it can be fabulous. So we have ideas about, questions, varying the questions, candidates get to ask each other. You have yes and no, you put up cards, you can have, factual questions. Who here, do any of you know what the kids population is of our city? They don't know. So that's always, you can have them put up the answer on a card. So there are lots of ways to make this wonderful and to build a crowd and to have agencies say, okay, we're going to bring 10 people or we're going to bring 15 people. And in many of your communities, it may be the first ever candidate forum on kids issues or the first ever candidate forum run by young people. And that's the way you get the media involved. And then if you do this, there's just endless possibilities for follow-up, video, social media, the print, thank you so much for coming. Do you remember that you promised the following? So to candidates. So I love this. And I want to hear from Claudia, because I was just, my heart was just, it was so wonderful for me to hear what they did in Sacramento, because it was so exactly right on. So let's let Claudia talk about Sacramento and then Nicole can comment. And because Nicole works for candidates, she has really important things to say about this.
Sure. So to continue the story, the Sacramento Kids First Coalition, which is a group of varying youth serving organizations across the city, got together and organized a mayoral candidates forum for the primary. So it occurred in January. And I think what was really special and unique about this forum was that the young people from the various organizations, they're the ones who developed all the questions, of course, with adults supporting them. And then at the actual candidate forum, it was two young people who asked the questions and kind of led us through the whole event. And there were about, I would say, 500 people there. We were in a high school auditorium, but it still felt upbeat, positive, lots of clapping, lots of cheering, and especially for the youth who were the ones leading the whole thing. And I'm sure, it took a ton of work, but the payoff was absolutely enormous.
Yeah. Okay, I'm going to tell you why I think we got Gavin elected before. We were having a mayor's race, Gavin Newsom against Matt Gonzalez. Matt Gonzalez was the Green Party, the progressive person, the absolute favorite among all my colleagues who were children and youth advocates. And so we had this huge candidate forum, and the way we did it is we did it sequentially. One spoke for the first 45 minutes left, and the other spoke for the second 45 minutes and left, or maybe it was half an hour, I don't remember. There was one candidate who won, and maybe president someday, who knew the answer to every fucking question, who was so gracious and so wonderful and promised to rely on everybody who was in the room for his agenda, et cetera, et cetera. And there was one candidate who we thought was, who was hopeful, who had not taken it seriously, who didn't have reasonable answers to questions, et cetera, et cetera. I maintain that was the point when the tide turned. Because, there were a lot of people there and a lot of people changed their mind about who they were going to vote for. Okay, that's it.
That's great. This is awesome. And Margaret is phenomenal at this. And I think I agree. It's a huge, huge opportunity. And I heard a lot about the Sacramento Forum as well. So it's awesome. Just a couple things from my perspective that are important here. In order to get candidates to take these forums seriously, have as wide of a coalition as possible, as many organizations as possible. Even if you have one umbrella organization that represents a lot of folks, they may not know that. They don't know about this world most likely. And so you want to have a long list. of as many organizations co-sponsoring this as possible to show how, wide this reaches in different communities. Make sure that that list is diverse and includes representatives. If you've got, you know, a large Latino population, that you've got organizations that are serving folks from Latino community, API community, that you've got groups from different parts of town, so that it's, if you're talking about a city, it's not just one part of the city, because they're not going to do more than one children or youth forum, and you don't want them to, right? You want it to be just one. So you should get organized on the front end to get as long of the list as possible. The other thing I would say, it doesn't mean that every organization is involved in the planning of it, that they're leading the decision-making of what this looks like. You can have a steering committee of, you know, 3 or 4 organizations or whatever that are really leading it. That's fine. They don't need to know that. But they want to see a lot of organizations. The other thing that's important is, of the folks that are the real leaders of the organizations, it's pretty important that the leaders of those organizations are not involved in these candidate campaigns, because I just recently saw a candidate forum get canceled because one of the organizers of that forum was already supportive of a particular candidate for mayor and had already been organizing them, and then the rest of the candidates said, forget about it, this is a biased forum. So what I said before about, like, you can do anything on your own time, that is true, but if you've already been involved in a particular campaign, you shouldn't be organizing the forum, because you really want to make sure that the people that show, that when they show up and they believe that they're going to be treated fairly, or they're not going to show up. Other than that, I think Margaret did a great job. One other thing, make sure you have childcare provided at these candidate forums, because you want to make it accessible to parents, and you want also these candidates to see a lot of kids, you know, playing in the room next door when they get there, right? So
And food.
for sure.
I'm interested in your opinion, Nicole, because candidates want to see voters. They don't just want to see young people.
That is
So,
right.
I think your point that they want to see people from different parts of town, they want to see people with different kinds of visibility in the community. So, yeah, I think that I've been part of some candidate forums that were just youth, and they've had an impact, but I personally think it's better if people look out and see people they know are voters.
Yeah, I totally agree. And honestly, the more the better. But don't feel like you have to have 500 people for it to be a success. But I think you kind of have to have 50 people. You don't want to be having a candidate forum with 12 people. Then it's not a candidate forum. You know, it's really like more of a roundtable discussion. So I would say, like, you know, think about what's a reasonable goal, but, you know, 50 minimum probably.
But if you have, 20 organizations,
Yeah.
and they each commit to bring it, and they bring every parent in their child
Yeah.
care center, you can get to 500.
100%. Yeah, you absolutely can. And like, it's a pretty low ask of a coalition member and a volunteer to show up for an hour and a half to hear to hear from the candidates.
So I was very impressed with what they did in Philadelphia last year in the mayor's race. I mean, they really put all these ideas together, and I love their agenda. They summarized it, safety, education, careers, uplift, recreation, environment. You saw the pledge they had people sign. They had 40 nonprofits who came together to do this during the election. And I do have a couple of links. When you can't go to the links when you're watching a PowerPoint, can you? But we're going to get this out to everyone, because there are a couple links. There's a link to this campaign and the pledges they had, a link to the Silicon Valley Community Foundation campaign. And we're going to send this out to people so that you can see some of these other things that people have done. And in this campaign in Philadelphia, there's a tape of their press conference. They did everything. They did the questionnaires, they did the candidate forum, they put together an agenda, and they had all these signs, and I don't know if they did bumper stickers, but hey. So just, we're hoping that people will share some of their ideas or brainstorms that they get, from sort of watching this. I don't know if it inspired you, or I hope it did. I love this poster. This is a very early poster of the Children's Defense Fund. I'm the only person in the country now, I think, who has it. And when I asked them for an electronic version, somebody had to go into the basement and find this. But I think it's a great poster because it's so true. And what we're trying to do now is make it not true. So they care as much after they get elected as, as they appear to care before they get elected. So I'm gonna stop sharing and see what we have here in terms of people's ideas and thoughts. Oh, Elizabeth did who's for kids and who's just kidding. In Missouri. Yeah, we all did it. We stole it from each other. I have used it ever since. Do you want to say anything about that, Elizabeth, or Courtney? You want to say about what you have in mind to do in San Diego?
Yeah, I mean, I think for San Diego, this is always really helpful. And some of these tactics Margaret coached us on about 3 years ago when we really cultivated our champions who helped establish our City of San Diego Office of Child and Youth Success, who have also helped us change at least half a dozen policies to remove barriers to expanding childcare, and now are joining us in some newer goals for the 2026 ballot. So I think the candidate forum is an interesting consideration, and just personally, I'm trying to figure out like how to show out for our champions in re-election while balancing non-biased approach with a forum and a questionnaire. I mean, I'm not local celebrity status by any means, but I wouldn't want engagement showing out for champions to, implode tactics and plans for future campaigns. So that's an interesting consideration that I'm walking away with.
So we have a contract with the Alliance for Justice, which is, which gives people, just one call with the Alliance for Justice to ask your very specific questions, like how specific can we be in the questionnaire? How much can it be obvious that what the answers need to be, and how it applies to the questionnaire, the questions in the candidate forum. And they do have, I will find their sort of write-up on this, but anybody who's seriously thinking about this, like San Diego, happy to set you up with the person who from Alliance for Justice, if you really want to sort of think through the nitty-gritty of what you can and can't do, or whether somebody else is important to be the most visible person besides you. Heaven forbid.
I do put all of my candidate donations under my husband's name.
Yeah, I just did that. I just did that. I was going to say to whoever was from government, like, now I headed an organization for 25 years that did this. And after I left, they decided to start a C4 so they could endorse candidates. You can do that. You can create a PAC. You don't even have to, it isn't that hard, just to do a PAC. I actually think it was a mistake, but it is, but did it once in a school board race. We're so angry that we sort of latched onto an existing PAC, called it the Parents Lobby, and endorsed specific candidates because there were some creeps running. But I don't, it's something to think about. I actually, I don't know what you think, Nicole. I don't totally recommend it. What happened to the organization that I led is they've become very identified with one part of the political spectrum. And that has helped them and given them clout with that, but it's also weakened their influence in the other parts of the political spectrum. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, I agree with you. I think it's short-sighted, for the advocacy groups because, you know, less than 50% of the time your candidate's gonna win, because there's often many candidates in these races too, and then you put yourself in a position where you, it doesn't mean they won't work with you, but they're not gonna forget that you didn't endorse them.
They never fucking forget. Excuse me.
It will negatively impact your relationship with them. It will. And in terms of folks that you do endorse, if they have one-year endorsement, meaning like they're gonna be really good on your issues, they're probably gonna be a good partner anyway. And so I just don't think personally the gain is worth the loss, but that's certainly debatable. And some people, you know, may think differently, and member organizations like labor unions, you know, the Bike Coalition in some places, like some environment, there's member organizations that do endorsements, and you know, there's benefits and drawbacks for them in doing that. But generally I agree with you, Margaret.
Are there questions I'm missing? Are people's ideas that I'm missing?
Courtney asked a question in the chat, who is the best point person to learn more about PACs and that decision making?
I don't know. I'll get into the best. Nicole and I'll figure out. I formed a
Yeah.
PAC when I started funding the next generation. And I ended up closing it down because I couldn't make it work. But so I have instructions on how to do it in California, but Nicole.
Yeah, Andrew on my team knows about how to do that as well. So you know, through Margaret, we could always set up time for him to talk to folks and kind of talk through that process.
Yeah. So we are resources to people, and Nicole has a whole team of people who work on campaigns and know all the legal aspects of this. And we have access to the Alliance for Justice. So please feel free. I don't know if Christine is still there because her picture is there from the Silicon Valley Community Foundation. Are you there? I can't.
I'm here, Margaret.
Yeah, I was wondering if you wanted to say, because because the foundation has done this Vote for Kids stuff.
Mhm.
And I want to, if you want to say a little bit about it and how it's worked.
Yeah, we've been involved in the Choose Children is what we call the campaign. It's a little bit different because it's really pretty focused on engaging candidates and candidate forums and things versus necessarily a PR campaign and voter outreach, although we do definitely do that. I could talk like literally, Mara, I could talk for a long time if we want to talk about the Choose Children stuff, but I'll try the condensed version. We have had a lot of success, both statewide. We worked in 2018 on the statewide campaign and focused on the gubernatorial election. And then in the years since then, we pivoted and now we focus on local, pretty much exclusively county supervisor seats in California, in our 2-county region. But for instance, like right now in 2024, we're engaged in 4 different races. I've done one-on-one briefings, and this year they were really successful prior to the primary because I scheduled them with parents and providers to do a candidate briefing with me. And sometimes we did tours of childcare centers, so we brought candidates there. We offer them to every single candidate that's running for the different races that we are engaging in. So I did 14 candidate briefings And the big hook to talk with candidates is the polling results that you mentioned. So we do a voter survey. We actually don't call it polling. We are pretty careful to refer to it as voter surveying. And so we meet with them and share what we've learned about families' experiences with early childhood, their attitudes, their feelings. And then as part of that voter survey, we test voters' appetite for about, I don't know, 15 to 20 different initiatives, policies, investment opportunities. And so we leave those with the candidate, like, here's some ideas if you were to be elected into office that you might think about. And we've actually over the years now are starting to really see some of those, county supervisor roles decide, oh, wouldn't it be great if we could offer healthcare benefits through our county health plan to our childcare workers? And they may or may not remember that they were introduced that idea through Choose Children, but we don't really care. It's still, so we're starting to see not only are, different candidates that are champions for kids elected, but they're starting to implement ideas that we've suggested. And you mentioned one of the key things for our success of our partnership is that we have quite we just have a lot of partners who've signed on to our Choose Children pledge, who are on our website, who help us with our candidate forums. So this year I added 14 briefings and I've done 3 candidate forums now. And in the fall, we'll do another round of candidate forums. So I don't know, is there anything else? And we're extremely cautious about the staying in our lane, following the rules. So we document everything. Every candidate gets exactly the same questions, the exact same emails, the exact same amount of time. Not all of them want to talk with us, but everyone has the same opportunity. If I send documents, follow-up slide deck to a candidate that I met with, I make sure that even the candidates that didn't choose to meet with me get the same slide deck as a follow-up, so they all have exactly the same information. And our candidate forums have been pretty successful. And then afterwards, we transcribe them and we hold on to them so that whoever is elected, we actually can then go back later and say, well, you mentioned that you would do blah, blah, blah. And so that's been helpful. And between elections, we kind of lay low and we allow the rest of the folks who are the advocates in the community to amplify the efforts. And then we ramp up during the election cycle.
I want to point out that this is a community foundation doing this. So I don't know if you want to think about your relationship with your community foundation, and could this be a model for the community foundation? And the second thing is, I think what you made a strategic decision, if I'm not wrong, which is, as you said, we're going to focus on educating the candidates because that's where that's where the greatest impact on policy can be. And I thought that was very wise and interesting, rather than sort of trying to educate the entire public education campaign to make it focused on candidates.
And I think, Margaret, part of the reason for that decision is the role of us as the community foundation. So we fund advocates, partners in the community who do that work ongoing and feel like that's their expertise. That's a great spot for them. And for us to be able to support that work. And we do it, we're deeply engaged with it and we support it. But there was nobody doing the candidate education role. And that was a good spot for us to step in and do it. And then, to be honest, sometimes being the funder in the community, people will answer the call. So if I call the candidate, they're more likely necessarily to say, oh, the community foundation is calling me. I'll take that phone call. So we actually, sure, I'm happy to use the idea that we might open doors and then bring partners in with us. And then we sort of focused on that one spot that needed some attention, and then we can help fund and the whole ecosystem and keep that going more long term. So partly it's a capacity thing. It's just me. So I have a little tiny team that helps me out, but then I network with lots of partners. So we only have capacity to do so many races. But I think somebody asked me which counties were engaged. So we're Silicon Valley. So we're San Mateo and Santa Clara County. And we also did the San Jose mayor's race. couple of years in 2022, because that was a high profile race and it gave us a really good chance to elevate kids. And I'll tell you one thing, it was interesting, you mentioned, we also do a voter guide on children's issues as part of it. So, and that actually goes out to anyone running in for like county supervisor, city council, school districts broadly, and just general questions about kids.
I forgot about voter guides.
Yeah.
Why not, can you tell a little bit about what's in the voter guide?
It's super simple. It's 5 questions. We do it in partnership with the Santa Clara County Office of Ed and Kids in Common, which is another nonprofit. And we compile after the filing deadline for us, which is, I can't remember, August something, for all of those local seats. We compile all that information, then we send out an email to everyone and they get a link. And they literally go online and they fill out 5 questions. And it's not just for I'm mostly early childhood, but this is like children's across sort of 0 to 18 and families. And then on the back end, the system then just populates the website. You can look, I think just look up Santa Clara County Voter Children's Guide. I'll put it in the chat in a second. The system just populates at one point after the deadline. Canada gets a certain amount of time to respond. And then we launch the guide. And if they've taken the time to put in thoughtful answers, it's there. If they slapped in something and it's messy, it's there. We don't correct typos or anything. So people can, and then we share it out. We had about 4,000, 5,000 hits on it in 2022 of folks who looked it up to check out responses. We'd love to have more than that, and I will say we had one candidate for a high profile race who, despite having, like, we always remind everyone, give a little extension, try to encourage people it takes a lot of legwork to get people to fill it out. And this individual candidate did not fill it out. So on the day when it was publicized and it got picked up in the newspaper, his answers were blank and he was really upset about that. But we were like, I'm sorry, you had multiple opportunities and our hands are tied. There are other people with blanks because they didn't respond either. And you just happened to be it was a major race. So people were paying attention. And
the more you do it, the more impactful it is. So now that person knows that people learn what the negative impact can be. I love that. And I was looking at it this morning, but your website for the campaign, tell people what it is.
It's just choosechildren.org.
Yeah.
And it's, like I say, it's pretty simple. Because we just didn't need to make it too complicated, and we really just wanted to get candidates for a variety of offices, but mostly Board of Supervisor to check us out. So children.org. And I'm happy if anyone wants to ever share the results of our polling. We use the voter survey to test messaging as well. And then I'm happy if anyone ever wants to reach out to me directly to share what it is we share with candidates, the information. So
when we do a follow-up, I will make sure that your email is in it so that people can contact you. Is that okay?
Yeah, sure.
That was a fabulous addition to Thank you so much. Does anybody else want to share some ideas or what they've done? Or I think maybe Nicole, you have any final comments here?
I think we covered a lot. I hope you guys enjoyed this. I do think now's the time to figure out what you want to do for 2024. It's not too late. I think we have this kind of perfectly timed session, but it is now. So, I would say really try to organize a strategy meeting and conversation with all the folks who you're working with to really think about what this could look like for 2024 and have a little bit of a game plan, in the next few weeks so that you can have the best impact as possible. And, this is about impacting the candidates and how they lead and how seriously they take children and youth issues, but it's also about expanding your coalition, building more relationships across issues, and kind of testing and preparing your volunteer leaders to be effective at running their own campaigns. So just keeping those things in mind, we focused a lot on how this impacts candidates, but by organizing a canvas, for another ballot measure, you're gonna get people, experience and training in how to do that for your own campaign. By doing a social media campaign around, we care about kids and we vote, you're gonna get people organized on how to do that when you're trying to get people to vote yes on Measure C. So think about it like that too.
Yeah. So, I hope people have enjoyed this. Any sort of comments about, did this work? Was it interesting? Are there ways we can, add to this whole effort to get people involved in campaigns? And just remembering, honestly, what the Silicon Valley Community Foundation has taken years to build up to do. And, you can start with something very simple. I mean, I started with the bumper sticker, but, a candidate, the Who's for Kids and Who's Just Kidding candidate questionnaire, it is not too late for that. And that can have a profound impact. Organizing a candidate forum is a little harder, but, do Olivia or Dan want to say anything? Okay, well, unless anybody objects, we are going to adjourn this meeting.
Thanks all.
Thank you all for coming. Oh,
Thanks, Margaret.
you put in choose
fine.
children, Claudia, yeah. Yeah, that was fabulous. I saw her there. I thought, oh my God, that was just a fabulous addition.
Yes,
So,
it was.
yeah. So
Is your computer okay? Is there Coke all over it still?
I got Coke all over. I have all these lists on different colored paces of stickies and stuff there. I can barely read them. I have a big cleanup